Hey everyone, Joey here, aka Animus, and today I'm going to be talking about the new album from Vale-Smith, Yo. Vale-Smith is a relatively under-the-radar independent British artist who you may know for his YouTube channel Buffalo Staple, which by the way I highly recommend. However, he's also an avid, passionate music producer who's been releasing playful, adventurous electronic music since the late 2010s. Origami, Tame Your Wild Garden, and Are You Sick of Being Unlucky were all exciting and pretty meticulously crafted records, where I had a great time with his bouncy, hyper-detail-oriented approach to IDM. However, it was last year's Coruscate where he seemed to truly hit his stride and find a sound that he could really own. A shimmering wonderland of organised electronic chaos that was non-stop ear candy, while also heading straight for your feet. And this was also followed up extremely swiftly in the same year by Rekindle, which was both a continuation and development of Coruscate's ideas, and a playground for new ones. While it was Coruscate that ended up making my year-end list for 2022, I can completely see why Vale-Smith himself considers this to be the superior album. But just months afterwards, we were already hearing talk of more new material. The guy seemingly just never stops making music, with suggestions that this would be his most ambitious work to date and top even those records that I've just mentioned. So finally last month we got to sit down and listen to his 6th full-length LP, and he didn't lie. This is undoubtedly my favourite Vale-Smith album, my favourite album of 2023 so far, and I guess a personal highlight of the 2020s decade up to this point. He essentially took this recent amped-up danceable sound that he's been exploring and combined it with the style of his more IDM-adjacent early work, and then turned everything up to 11, resulting in 20 seamlessly blended tracks of effervescent grooves and brain-frying sound design that explode out of your speakers like that burst of light on the album cover, all working to create a cohesive 70-minute experience that's chock full of surprises, head-spinning moments, and rushes of adrenaline. The sound of this album is just mind-blowing to me. The ambition, the attention to detail, and the bold, sometimes kind of ingenious ways in which he crafts these sounds are all far, far beyond what you'd normally expect from an artist of his stature. You can tell an insane amount of work went into every minute detail and into making each soundscape as balanced, dynamic, and punchy as possible. The energy level is kept so consistently high across almost the entire album that I initially thought this would be the type of thing I'd need to be in a very specific mood to fully enjoy, but if so, then I guess I've just been riding that high ever since. I've listened to this album many times now, and I spent the first week or so after its release putting it on pretty much every day. It absolutely zips by for an album of its length, and yet there's so much to unpack and so many tiny details to pick up on with each repeat listen, giving it unbelievably good replay value. Every time I've given it a listen, it's brightened my day and just giving me that little extra spring in my step. I'm truly grateful to have this as a part of my 2023 and beyond. Now, I would love to gush over all 20 of these tracks, but time does not permit, so I'll try and sum up the experience of listening to this album as well as possible, and make sure to particularly highlight the best of the best. Within the first seconds of Skip Scarlet, you're sent hurtling right into the world of the record, pads blaring in joyful bursts over a vibrant hip-hop beat, while hyper-detailed percussion flies around your head like you're in the middle of a storm of tiny glass particles. That would hurt, actually. The track eventually sort of stumbles over itself and falls apart into chaos, before suddenly you snap right back into track 2, Dream State Indulgence. A fun type of transition that this album often makes use of. This second track, with its buoyant house beat and jazzy piano stabs, is just like cool lemonade on a summer's day. The way the groove of this track comes in is one of several instances on the record where I'm often out in public with my headphones and break out into a smile, trying desperately not to start bopping all the way down the street like I'm in a music video. Another one of these moments would be on Pristine Drifting, where you're lulled for a good minute by rich atmospherics before it just... Then we get Insatiable Laputa, which has one of the best track titles I've heard in a long time. This track is just... the moment where all its lush sounds burst out at you from all angles makes me feel like I'm a little kid again at the entrance to a theme park. Fantasy Interlude might be a brief moment in the track listing, but the way it envelops you with warm pads and incredible ear candy is like if music could give you a hug. Then of course we fly right into Fantasy, all bright plucks and shimmering chimes, building yet another richly detailed, infectious foot tapper. Then the way it transitions into Neat Tricks All Day, it's as if you're getting sucked into an arcade machine where all the Pac-Man ghosts are having a hardcore rave. One of the most bonkers moments on the album for sure. And New Universes. Whew. Easily one of the most visceral things that Vale-Smith has ever created, suddenly comes in with this whirlwind of saturated snippets of sound, and then out of nowhere hits you with this bam 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 before the super fuzzed out synth comes blasting in and practically swallows up the entire soundscape. The way this track is mixed is very unconventional, making for one of the very few moments on the album that I haven't entirely made up my mind on, but I feel it's very deliberate, ignoring all the normal rules of how to balance a track to deliver this arresting blast of pure joy. Listen to the whole album, but you should seriously check out this one in particular. The first time I heard it, my eyes practically popped out. And speaking of holy shit moments, The Real Bright Blue is an ambitious 6-minute multi-phase IDM piece that may just be my favourite Vale-Smith track to date. It starts out sounding fairly standard fare, but as it builds it becomes more and more dense and chaotic until we transition into these frantic blasts of noise and amorphous industrial clattering, where the only comparable thing that comes to mind for me is Autechre's Pen Expos, which is a very high compliment. Finally sputtering out into a drone that slowly rises into one of the most blissful, weightless moments on the album. Wow! Honestly, one of the most creative pieces of electronic music I've heard in years. I'd call Waiting the album's one fully fledged breather track, and it's beautifully put together with some lovely phased piano, soft vocal samples, ocean sounds, and the surprising addition of horns, which brings some nice acoustic warmth to switch things up a bit. It's pretty much perfectly positioned in the track listing with how much Vale-Smith is about to up the ante in not too long, and how high the ante has consistently been. Moving into the final stretch of the record, the fast-paced metallic shimmer and pulsating kicks of Precipice are a standout moment, but it's the final 3 tracks where he goes really, really hard. Every time I hear the beginning of Don't Get Hurt, I get this little jolt of energy and excitement. It's an obvious highlight for me. It's got a driving beat, catchy vocal snippets, and the usual opulent production, but also a killer payoff around the 3-minute mark, where the track fizzles out into complete silence and then absolutely explodes into a blissful sensory overload. It's pretty magical, but structurally nothing quite reaches the ambitious heights of Itinerant But Still Nothing, the album's second lengthy experimental cut, and I guess kind of its centerpiece. Stretching on for 8.5 minutes, we begin with dark, hard-hitting sound design, frantic bursts of percussion, and pitch-shifted, stuttering rap, reminiscent of wonky artists such as Igloo Ghost. Eventually the whole thing kind of layers on top of itself and begins lurching and slowly breaking down into complete formlessness. Then we go through multiple further movements and key changes before some dusty, melancholic piano leads us out into a stretch of almost complete silence except for quiet, droning noise. Definitely one of the tracks that's given me the most to think about on the album. It's a surprisingly dark moment, and I've realised really well links with its title, constantly moving and shifting before eventually fading out into, well, nothingness. I feel there's a message this track is trying to get across, and while I can't know what that's intended to be for certain, I feel I can relate this to how it feels sometimes to be in a dark spot, where you're moving from place to place and thing to thing, but nothing's really quite working. There is a section of, like, borderline complete chaos in this track that would definitely be a matter of personal preference, but I feel like it's a similar thing with, what's it called? What a Surprise on the most recent Orbital album, where I kind of enjoy just how completely overwhelming the soundscape deliberately is. This could have been a very powerful, dark moment for the album to end on, but instead, after the darkness, we end on a more characteristically joyful note for this album with Sister What, where the light shines again through one last uplifting groove, before in the album's very final seconds we hear this little gradually quickening blip echo out. Perhaps a little cliffhanger ending to the album. And that was all of Yo, which does not feel like a 20-track, 70-minute album in any way. Or, like, it does, sort of, but, like, in the best way possible. I get to the end and I feel like I've watched this little movie. I really feel that with this album he's pushed himself to reach even greater heights and, as a result, struck gold. I don't even really know what I want with the next Vale-Smith album, because this feels like the logical peak of the evolution of this new style he's been exploring, and I'd love to hear more, but I guess maybe I'd like to hear just some kind of completely new spin on his sound. But I'm excited for whatever he feels like putting out, really. Or he could absolutely deservedly just take a step back and give himself a pat on the back, because such an incredible level of craft clearly went into creating this new LP. It is quite possible he might watch this review, and if so, this isn't just an attempt at flattery. This new album genuinely made me so happy. This might sound funny, but it does really carry across with this album that this is someone who just really loves music and loves life. It's the kind of thing that I feel could accentuate my best times and bring me up in my lowest. It's just an absolute joy. Honestly, I'm feeling a 9 on this one. Thank you, Vale-Smith, for all that you do, and thank you, the viewer, for watching. See you next time.